Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of NFI Hammer. In this video I will be painting a Necron Cryptothrall. These are really cool units that I'm very excited to paint, and as a beginner they don't look too challenging, so I'm hoping that it should be a pretty straightforward endeavour. Cryptothralls, not to be confused with Crypto Bros, are slaves and bodyguards used by cryptechs. And they're not really sentient beings, but they're kind of semi-sentient but completely enslaved to their master's will, and their one job is just to protect their masters with their bodies. And this is why they're little, like, rotund little machines. And this translates really interestingly on the tabletop with this Cryptech retinue skill, which I'll get into more details at the end of the video if you're interested in this. What's also awesome is that these models are only available as part of the Indominus box or the Necron Royal Court, but there's actually another way that you can get these at a really super cheap rate. I talk about this in another video, so if you're interested in picking up some of these official Games Workshop models at an unbelievable price, go check that out. The assembly of these models are pretty straightforward. As these models aren't very large, they're pretty easy to put together. They also are pushpin models, so they're even easier than having to mess around with different glue. And with sort of their legs and the shell, there's only really one side that works, so if you get it wrong, just switch it over to the other side and it'll click into place. I'm really amazed on how they can fit the entire Royal Court on just this one sheet. It's quite clever how they managed to pack them all in there. After they're all built, it's time to prime them. So what I'm going to use is just my Rust-Oleum black primer paint that you can get from Bunnings for around $17 dues, but any sort of primer hobby paint would work. I'm spraying them black because there's a lot of the inner core and spine that I'm going to leave black, so I just thought it might as well help me paint most of the models with the primer. So first up is Runelord Brass. So this is actually going to be the predominant colour because these units are just built to taking punches, and I use the brass on parts of the model that I think is sort of like heavily armoured, which in this case is pretty much the entire model. So this is the most boring and longest part of one of these models, as is many Necron models. After that, it's time to do the claws. So this is a technique that I developed with the Canoptic Spider, which is sort of the kind of very hard titanium type claws. I actually paint with this Rhinox Hide brown color, and I think with the black primer it just kind of gives it this really, not rusty, but like reddish metal look, and I use this on sort of the hardest claws and talons on the Necron. After that, it's time to do Leadbelcher, and this is where I kind of paint sort of the more delicate metal work of the Necron in this color. However, this model really doesn't have very much of this. They're kind of just blobs, and so there is only a few areas that I found that kind of fitted the color of Leadbelcher. Next, I'm moving on to the Gauss Green Weaponry Energy Particle color. So obviously the core of this Cryptothrall is a good place to use the green, as well as underneath the chin or the head of the unit there's this cord that connects it to the body, so I'm using that, as well as obviously the eyeball. It's a lot easier to paint than I would say a Necron Warrior or even an Immortal is, because they've got two beady little eyes, and they've also got like a sigil, and the weapon is quite difficult to paint. So this is really shaping up to be one of the easiest models for beginners to get started with. I'm also giving Tessearact Glow a opportunity. I used it at the very beginning before I bought Moot Green, but I haven't really bothered to go back. But you can paint it on dark black areas to kind of give it a glow effect, because it is a technical paint. And so I thought I'd give that a try around the reactor. Just because this model's so small and so simple, I thought I'd try something a bit different. I'm not totally convinced with how it turned out, but it was alright in the end. Next, it's just time to shade the brass color. So I'm just using Agrax Earthshade here, but I'm putting a pretty heavy coat on, as you can see. This is just because I want the model to kind of look beaten up and dirty and uncared for, more than just a generic sentient, Necron warrior. And then finally I'm putting some Agrax Earthshade onto the silvery bits, just to kind of again make them look a bit more worn and less plasticky. And that's pretty much it. Your Cryptothrall is ready to go. If you've made it this far, consider leaving a like or a subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And leave a comment below letting me know how you found it and any feedback for me. But don't go anywhere right now. Ahead there's still the basing step-by-step tutorial, as well as an explanation about how these guys are so good in Warhammer 10th edition. Firstly though, I just like to admire the finished product here. I really like how this unit is quite different from all the other Necrons. The other Necrons are very skeletal and thin, or scaraby, and this one just feels different. It's kind of like a chunky boy, and I really appreciate it. My only sadness is there's only 2 of these, compared to the dozens and dozens of warriors and immortals and death marks and stuff. I really feel like, they stand out as a unique unit. Moving on to the basing. So what I started off with is I thought I'd try using the technical Martian Ironcrust as the base layer over the entire area. And then I just used the paddle pop here to apply it. And then at the very end I pop out the hexagon symbol with the toothpick so that I can put my model back in. But I didn't want to go for the Martian aesthetic, because all my other Necrons and my other videos all have a moon style base. Think kind of a desolate alien world. So to do that, I applied a layer of Stormvermin Fur over the top. This was actually quite tricky because the Ironcrust was kind of peeling off a little bit. So I used the paint as glue to kind of glue some of it down. After that, I then did some Agrax Earthshade to kind of fill in some dark brown areas in some of the crevices. After that, I wanted to do a quick dry brush of Phoencian Purple, but really any colour works here, but I find the purple and the green complement each other quite well. I am getting a little bit better at applying dry brush, but I'm still not sure if I put enough on here or not. And then finally I have Dechalla Lilac, which is a very light purple, and I just did a quick dry brush of this over the tips. This way it kind of gives like the white reflection of the peaks of it from kind of like a sun shining down onto the planet. The bases were a little bit bare though, so I cracked out my alien tufts and some PVA glue, and I just thought I'd stick a couple of these on just randomly on different places to try and help create some unique, interesting look to it. And here's the finished product again, but this time looking more at the bases. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I think that it's a fairly quick and easy way of putting some interesting texture onto the base. Moving on into the gaming section, so I've started playing some of my first games of Warhammer 10th edition, and I have not been winning. I've been losing every game against Eldari. So I'm really excited to try these out because they're quite competitive. I see them in every list online of what models to run. And the reason why they're so strong, as I mentioned at the beginning, is this Retinue Cryptech skill, which basically allows your bodyguard to have an additional 2 units, these 2 Cryptothralls, and it just joins them like an additional 2 units. So what this means is, imagine you have your 20 Necron warriors, or your 10 immortals or whatever. You can add these 2 units in addition to those, and what this does is adds another 4 wounds to that unit, which just helps prevent it getting killed quickly. And additionally, these units have Feel No Pain 4, so that means that if you allocate your wound to it, then you can actually roll a Feel No Pain 4 roll, which just means that if you roll a 4 or higher, any damage is just shrugged off, and this happens after your normal armor save. And so this is just a really helpful way of making your units a bit tankier and tougher so that they just can't be killed. They also have a very close range Scouring Eye attack, which is nice to have if you happen to find yourself that close to another unit. And then they also have a okay, pretty weak melee attack. The cool thing with that though is when they get destroyed, if they are destroyed in melee combat, you actually get an opportunity to fight back on death if you can roll a 3+ on a d6. So yeah, very interesting units. Excited to give it a try in my next game, and I'll let everybody know how it goes. Anyway, this was a long video in the end, but thanks for sticking around, and again, remember to like, comment and subscribe, otherwise I'll see you next time. Bye.